Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about the state of the 2028 presidential race. Ecoline Insights actually produced two new polls, one in the Democratic primary and one in the Republican primary. These are the first 2028 election polls that we are getting after Election Day. So, take them for what they're worth. Probably not much, but it really does give us some, semblance of an idea of what this 2028 race is shaping up to be on either side. So, again, I say take these for what it's worth because a lot of these candidates, it's not like any of these candidates have announced their candidacy already. As you can see, Kamala Harris, as you'd probably expect, does have a gigantic lead over the rest of the field, but will she run? I don't think she will. Kamala Harris in the Democratic primary at 41% of the vote, Gavin Newsom at 8%, Josh Shapiro at 7%. As you can see, the deficit between first place and second place is what? 33%. It's a giant lead for Kamala Harris over second place Gavin Newsom. Josh Shapiro right up there, tied, or almost tied, I should say, with Gavin Newsom at 7%. Pete Buttigieg up there is 6%. Tim Walz at 6%. AOC actually at 4%. So clearly she does have some, base of diehard supporters in the Democratic Party that could be critical. Gretchen Whitmer only at 3%. You'd probably expect her to be a bit higher. JB Pritzker at 2%. Andy Bashir at 2%, as expected. Cory Booker at 2%. Jared Polis at 1%. Wes Moore at 1%. And then you got Fetterman, Warnock, who did register, but when you round, it is below 1% at 0%. Someone else at 1%. And then, of course, 16% of respondents are unsure. So that's for the Democratic primary. On the Republican side, it's really interesting when you compare these two races because and we'll see how this changes, of course. I doubt many of these people will run if JD Vance does run, which I expect him to do. But JD Vance in first place at 37% right now. Vivek Ramaswamy actually in second place. That's interesting. At 9%, tied with Nikki Haley. That's what I'd expect. At 9%, Ron DeSantis down even below Haley and Ramaswamy at 8%. Ted Cruz at 5%. It's pretty surprising in my opinion. Marco Rubio, solid showing at 5%. Sarah Huckabee Sanders at 2%. Josh Hawley, Tim Scott, Glenn Youngkin only at 1%, as well as Scott and Hawley. Kristi Noem at 1%. Then Britt Burgum, Stefanik, at 0%. Someone else at 3%, and 18% are unsure. So I say it's really interesting comparing these two races because Kamala Harris has a larger lead in the Democratic primary after losing a general election than does JD Vance in the Republican primary. So I always thought, and of course, I'm sure his numbers will go up once he is the actual vice president and Republicans see him in the vice presidential role. Then I think, a lot of these people who answer Ted Cruz in the poll or Ron DeSantis or Vivek Ramaswamy, they will say, yeah, okay, I'll support JD Vance. But it does show, him being, not even close to a majority of 51% really does show that JD Vance might be breakable in 2028. Time will tell, but, right off the bat, we see that, I wasn't really expecting many people to run against him, and I doubt they will. But it doesn't mean that if a couple strong people do challenge JD Vance, he could be breakable, even as the sitting VP. I don't know how involved the RNC will get. I doubt not too much. But hey, could we see? The thing is, though, these other names listed, Haley is too moderate, with Trump being president to win the nomination. Vivek Ramaswamy is probably too extreme to at least beat Vance, right? I mean, Vance and Ramaswamy will have the same block of voters. So that's not possible for Ramaswamy to win, really. DeSantis, I mean, 2024 just showed us he can't win a national campaign. He's too awkward, too bad of a campaigner. Ted Cruz, no. Marco Rubio, sure. He's the first one where it's like, yeah, you actually could see him building a coalition to beat JD Vance. But I mean, he's at 5%. It's not 37, but it's solid, and it's not like it's too far off from Ramaswamy at 9 or Haley at 9 or whatever. So Marco Rubio is really the only one on this list so far out of the top half of possibilities who I really could see challenging Vance, a serious challenge to Vance to win the nomination. But I do think still that Vance is heavily favored to win. But that's my thoughts right now. As for the Democratic candidates, again, I think it's extremely interesting that Kamala Harris has a larger lead in this primary than does JD Vance in the Republican primary. Again, I don't think that Kamala Harris will run. I think that I read a book and it was about the 2020 Democratic primary. And it didn't talk about Harris too much because she wasn't that big of a factor throughout the primary. She dropped out before Iowa. But I do remember it talking about how, Harris was extremely passionate about the campaign in 2020. However, her biggest fear was, in fact, winning the nomination and then losing to Trump in the general. This was 2020, mind you. So, after actually losing to Trump, I really think that, Harris, I don't really, it doesn't seem like nothing points to her being, very ego centered, right? Centered around herself and her personal ambitions, to me at least. So I feel like, considering that she lost to Trump, I really think that, that does matter to her and, her worst fear from 2020 did come true. And I think she knows she wouldn't win again. I think that if the Trump presidency goes relatively smooth, even if he has a low approval rating, then Vance would beat a lot of these people. I think that Vance is honestly a very winnable candidate. I don't think that Vance is too weak of a national candidate. Based off of really how he, transformed through the 2024 race. He started off very unpopular, but really gained popularity throughout. He's now actually has a net approval now that he's elected VP. But again, I don't think that Harris will run knowing that she lost in 2024 and would probably lose again in 2028. I think that she would be the underdog going into 2028. And a major theme looking at this list, it's not a good bench for Democrats. It is not. Just against Vance. I mean, obviously, this all hinges on how the Trump presidency goes. Will he keep his promises? Will he impose the tariffs, which would almost undoubtedly, create negative effects on the American consumer, in the U.S. economy, really make the economics, stand or economic whatever standpoint of the administration, a disaster. So it all depends. It all depends on what Trump does. But, let's just assume, whatever, the Trump presidency goes smooth. He leaves office with a 45% approval rating, and Vance is the nominee. I think that Harris would lose. I think that, what I was, starting that segment with, they don't have a good bench. Because you've got Harris. I think that she'd lose. I think that Gavin Newsom would lose. I don't think that he's a strong candidate at all to win back the white working class. Not even white anymore. It's all working class voters who feel abandoned by the Democratic Party. Shapiro, I think, could win. I think that Shapiro would be a very strong national candidate. I think that he'd be very effective in messaging whatever he has to message. And I do think that the Democratic Party really does appear that they have learned a lot from this election. They certainly didn't at 2016 because they only moved farther towards the middle. Um, but now it does seem like that they did. I mean, you have a lot of Democratic strategists saying that Bernie Sanders was right when it comes to what Bernie has been saying over the past 8 years or so about the Democratic Party, or how working class voters view the Democratic Party. And that's coming from my standpoint, where I think that Bernie Sanders, with his messaging, with his progressive messaging, would have crushed Donald Trump in both elections in 2016 and 2020. So it really does appear that the Democratic Party is moving in a direction where they are going to, at least attempt to win back some of these working class voters. And if the Trump presidency doesn't go well economically, especially, then that messaging could be effective. These voters can be taken back by the Democratic Party. Pete Buttigieg, continuing with what I was saying before, I think that Pete Buttigieg would lose to JD Vance. But he's down at 6%. As you could see, Newsom, Shapiro, Buttigieg, and Walz virtually tied. I mean, basically all these guys are tied when you think about it. Tim Walz, I don't think, the thing is, with Harris, I mean, I could see Newsom, Shapiro, Buttigieg all running, but I don't think that Walz or Harris will run. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I don't think that Tim Walz will run. But this is not a guy who wants national attention, right? He doesn't care about the attention, especially after he already lost an election for VP. But he's at 6%. Honestly, I don't know. Whatever. I don't know exactly how much support I think these people have. AOC, as I said in the beginning, I mean, somewhat strong showing of support. AOC would be old enough to run for president in 2028. We'll see if it happens. I could see her running as a way to drive the Democratic Party towards the left. This would be an interesting campaign. And then you've got, but obviously, I don't think that she stands any chance of winning the nomination. Out of these guys, the only ones that I really could see winning the nomination, if they were to run, Harris, absolutely. Newsom has a chance. Shapiro has a chance. Buttigieg has a chance. I don't think that Tim Walz has a chance. AOC doesn't have a chance. Whitmer, almost no chance when you've got this other competition, especially seeing her at 3%. I don't think that she could win. Pritzker, I honestly don't think that he could possibly build a strong enough coalition to win a national primary. Bashir, I do think, could, come out lucky in a few early states like not New Hampshire, well, maybe New Hampshire, but especially South Carolina and Nevada. That could be super interesting, to see how he moves forward there. Um, Maybe Michigan too. I think that out of these people, the strongest candidate in the general election would be Andy Bashir. If Democrats want to win, in my opinion, I'd say that Andy Bashir is their best bet right now. But other names, you've got Cory Booker, Jared Polis, Wes Moore, John Fetterman, Raphael Warnock. I'm sort of surprised not, seeing Warnock not, oh my God, not even at 1%, but I mean, whatever. 457 people in this poll. He could very well be at 1%. He could be at 2%. Who knows? So that's the state of the race. Let me know who you all are thinking of supporting. If you're a Democrat, maybe one of these names like Bashir, Harris, etc. Ooh, JB Pritzker is not looking good in that photo. Or if you're a Republican, let me know, whatever these names that Wikipedia gives us stands out, but whatever. So that's the state of the race right now. Harris and Vance have leads in their respective parties. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later.